you want to start by giving us a bit of an intro?
Yeah. So thanks for having me. So my name is David. I am co-founder and CEO at Outlier Compliance Group. Outlier Compliance Group is a Canadian-born consulting firm, essentially helping companies in both established and regulated sectors, emerging sectors, navigate complex regulatory requirements.
Hmm.
Our clients range from startups, but also larger firms that are looking to evolve their compliance programs. Most of the work we do is within the AML space, or sort of the financial crime space, if you will. Uh,
Nice.
but we also do privacy, regulatory compliance management, operational risk, and kind of larger governance and GRC related solutions as well. Um, One thing I'll note is that all of our consultants have over 10,000 hours of deep industry expertise, and
Nice.
that's really different about us. We don't have junior staff. The company itself lends its name from the book Outliers, The Story to Success by Malcolm Gladwell,
Mhm.
which one of the key concepts in the book is to be really good at something, you have to have deliberate practical experience, roughly 10,000 hours.
Absolutely. And I guess I was going to ask, how did you start the business? And can you just tell us a little bit about some of the inspiration for starting the business?
Yeah, for sure. So what inspired us to start the business was really something that we were seeing in the existing industry at the time. Most of the consulting that was done within financial crime space was from the larger organizations, and a lot of smaller companies and startups just couldn't afford it. There were
Yeah.
certain sectors that weren't even serviced very well. So it was kind of from that need that we started the business, and we wanted to approach it differently as well. So at the time, fixed fee pricing wasn't very common.
Right.
Uh, so the surprise billing was way too common, and I think we felt that a client deserves transparency and being able to predict what their costs are going to be.
Yeah.
So that was also another big piece for us was working on fixed fee engagements. We sit down with the prospective client, we figure out scope, and we give you a price, and there's no effective fees. And we
Nice.
started that 13 years ago, and that is exactly the same model we follow today. I think things have changed and there's more fixed fees, but yeah, that was one of us. It was really to serve, sectors that weren't being serviced well or couldn't afford the larger firms and the fixed fees, but also that senior experience. Projects have senior experts. We don't have junior staff.
Tell me about why do so many companies still see compliance as a burden instead of a growth enabler?
I think compliance companies see it as a burden because it's seen as a cost center, right? And,
Right.
and and the unfortunate part is a lot of businesses, unless the tone at the top is the culture of compliance and protecting the company from risk overall, I think companies still see that as, oh, it's an output. We are spending dollars and
Yeah.
not bringing in revenue, and that's a hard calculation, right? The reality is your regulator may never come to you. You never may get a fine. But in the absence of it, it's really hard to calculate what that cost is. And really the companies we work with are companies that believe in compliance. We don't want to work with companies that are checking
Yeah.
compliance. Really, compliance in our opinion is it can be an advantage, right? Like at the end
Yeah.
of the day, um, fraud is a perfect example where that is a very real risk, and any business is very concerned with it. Um, we approach, when we're talking about AML controls and AML processes, a lot of times we're actually taking it from a fraud protection angle, and it usually meets most of the requirements from an AML perspective, and that's sometimes helps in terms
Yeah.
of that culture in the buy-in. But generally, yeah, I think it is again a tone at the top. It is seen as a cost center, so it is hard, and people see it
Yeah.
as a cost and a burden. And the reality is the landscape continues to evolve and change, and there are some big changes that are happening and continue to happen within the industry.
Yeah. But why are so many companies and organizations still almost reactive rather than proactive when it comes to regulatory risk?
Yeah, I think there's a few reasons there, but one of the reasons I think we see the most
Yeah.
is a lot of our clients are startups and technology companies, and they're building
Right.
really cool things, and they want to just get it out there. And the
Yeah.
reality is, they can build something faster than they can change the compliance processes internally. Sometimes they make a change and they don't realize, oh, that changes or puts us offside regulatory requirements. So I think that's sometimes part of the issue as well.
Absolutely. Where can our audience find you, David, in the business, please?
Website is outliercanada.com. But you can follow us on LinkedIn as well. We're probably more active there. We do posting of content, whether that's written. We do weekly videos. It's called the Weekly Cup of Compliance, where we put out little tidbits.
Nice.
Yeah.
I guess what I would love to ask you is, what is there any trends that you've seen in the last 5 years in the industry, and how has the industry, I guess, changed over the last, say, like 5 years, in particular with things like AI and technology?
Yeah, so there's definitely trends, and we can continue to see them. I think I'll answer that question kind of in two parts. Trends
Of
from
course.
what we're seeing on the regulatory landscape, and then what we're seeing from the work that we do as well. So from a regulatory perspective, I think we can summarize the last 5 years, as you said, as there really are themes around higher standards, and our regulator, who's FinTrack, so the Financial Transactions Reporting Analysis Center of Canada, they're taking a stronger stance to enforcement and monitoring. Just actually earlier this year in March, at the end of March, so very recently, we saw increased maximum administrative monetary penalties. So our previous penalties have increased 40 times now. So, in terms of the calculation and the damage that it can do for a business, that is substantially higher. We're seeing mandatory compliance regime go in place. So, if you do receive one of these administrative monetary penalties, you have to enter into an agreement. And if you don't follow the timelines or the regulator is not satisfied with that, there's a compliance order, and then that has its own fines
Right.
associated with it. As part of that more recent change that we saw in March, there's higher standards around AML compliance programs. So the regulator's focus is really on the effectiveness and no longer
Right.
technical compliance only. And then we saw some of their powers expanded as well. So that's kind of what we're seeing on the regulatory side. We tend to sit in a lot of FinTech examinations as well. And then from the ones that are published, we're seeing a lot of findings related to suspicious transactions, and that has been for kind of the last 4 or 5 years.
Hmm.
Robustness of compliance programs seems to be a common issue, and a two-year effectiveness review is another issue. So, reporting entities in Canada have to have a compliance effectiveness review every
Right.
years, and it's supposed to test the effectiveness of your program. So it looks at your operations, but it also looks at your documented processes. It needs to be done by an expert, and it should be independent, ideally. Companies are sometimes not doing those, or they are not doing them to the depth of the expectation from the regulator.
Right.
So that is another trend we're seeing from that perspective when we're kind of out there in doing reviews. I think from the review work, from the audit work that I just talked about, the compliance effectiveness reviews, we're seeing a lot of gaps between documentation and process.
Right.
So we talked a little bit earlier about the speed to technology and creating solutions that are really cool. But sometimes we're seeing that internal processes have changed, and there's a gap between documentation. Which in itself is a compliance issue. The ideal is, as long as your operational is robust and it's doing what it's supposed to, it's not the biggest gap, but it is something that we are seeing. The documentation and processes don't align, and we're seeing a lot of reporting issues. So our regulator made changes to reporting a few years ago, and I think industry is still struggling. There isn't guidance out there in terms of
Yeah.
scenario under the sun. Business models are different. So when we're going in to do these effectiveness reviews, we're seeing a lot of common reporting issues. And then lastly, the trend, everybody's favorite word, AI. So We've seen everything from the good and the bad related to AI. We've seen potential leads come to us with, well, we don't need to hire you. AI did the document, created the policy and procedure for us. And in those instances, that's usually a fail. But we've seen some very great uses of AI internally to help with some of those reporting obligations that I talked about, transaction monitoring, screening, some of those operational pieces. Um, but the human expertise is always needed, even with
Absolutely.
AI assistance. So
Yeah, absolutely. Um, we have a lot of sort of C-suite and founders, but we also have a lot of younger audience, a lot of, as in younger professionals who are
yeah.
thinking about maybe getting into their first job or career. Do you have any advice? It could be something so small. Do you have any advice or words for, somebody thinking about maybe getting into the space or just starting their journey, whether it's in finance or, compliance, whatever it is?
Yeah, so I think somebody that is looking to get into compliance, and is just starting off in their journey, there's a few questions to ask, and one of them is why. Why do you want to work in compliance? Are you
Yeah.
passionate about it, or is it because somebody works in it and makes good money? And I think there are very different, scenarios there. You have to do something that you love, right?
Mhm.
You have to think about it from that perspective. If you are passionate about compliance and want to work in it, education is definitely important, but I don't think you have to be fixated on taking the right courses. I think
Yeah.
what happens is it's the after school. So the
Mm.
networking, the events, the more practical training pieces out there, that is probably what is going to be most valuable for you. From a networking perspective, there are people that are just starting their journey. There's people like me that
Yeah.
have been in it for 20 plus years already. Ask questions, be curious,
Yeah.
ask questions that you maybe don't even feel are right to ask. I think people naturally will share their experiences, the good and the bad. I think in my career earlier, I was very, I guess you could say, even afraid of asking the wrong questions, that I did not ask
Yeah.
the right questions very earlier in my career. And I was lucky, I think this was like many people that have been in the space for 20 plus years, there wasn't programs related to compliance per se, or specifically for
Yeah.
laundering and financial crime.
Yeah.
I was working at a bank, and I was
Right.
in the fraud department, and there was some major changes just after the September 11 events, uh,
Mhm.
and I got to review documentation and policies and procedures, and that's how I got interested in financial crime and anti money laundering. And then I moved throughout my career and worked in larger compliance, and then kind of came back to more financial crime as well. And then we started the firm about 13 years ago.
That's a great overview, and thank you very much, David. I've really enjoyed the conversation. So thank you very much for your time.